Welcome. Welcome to Tiny Desk Worship for First Church and Parish in Dedham. Today is Sunday, January 10th, 2021. So glad you can be with us. We will begin by ringing our bell. And our centering thought is from Anais Nin, A Journal of Love, the Unexpurged Diary of Anais Nin, 1932 to 1934. Reality doesn't impress me. I only believe in intoxication, in ecstasy, and when ordinary life shackles me, I escape one way or another, no more walls. I invite you to relax into our prelude, Meditations on Reek by Matt Meyer. Today we celebrate the life of Jane Kelly. This is not a memorial service. This is a regular worship service, and I hope it will have meaning for all of you. We also hold in our hearts and our minds our friend Hannah Held, who died last week. Hannah was a longtime member of First Church, and she was a friend, and she came to many yard sales, and I got to know her as well, and she will be sorely missed. If you have any pictures from that era, please contact me because we are looking for any 1980s photos. I also want to remind you that all of our activities are on our website. We do have a new writers group starting this week, and I hope you'll consider joining that. Please watch your all church email. And if you have questions about any of our events, go to our website, dedhamuu.org, or contact the church office at firstchurch@dedhamuu.org. We will now begin our morning worship with our introit, O Freedom, an African American spiritual, played by Derry Dolezal. Our opening words are Kaddish Yatom, the mourner's Kaddish, a meditation before Kaddish. When I die, give what is left of me away to children and old men that wait to die. And if you need to cry, cry for your brother walking the street beside you. And when you need me, put your arms around anyone and give them what you need to give me. I want to leave you something better than the words or sounds. Look for me in the people I've known or loved. And if you cannot give me away, at least let me live in your eyes and not your mind. You can love me best by letting hands touch hands and letting go of children that need to be free. Love does not die, people do. So when all that's left of me is love, give me away. Please join with me in singing our hymn 111 in your gray hymnal, Life of Ages Richly Poured. I light our chalice today for our friend Jane Kelly, who was a good friend to many, challenged some of us to be better, challenged herself, and took a long walk into the next life in December. And we light our green sanctuary candle for all the ways we strive to be a more sustainable congregation. Please say with me the unison affirmation as is written in your order of service. Love is the spirit of this church, and service is its law. To dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in freedom, to serve humanity in love is our covenant with each other and with God. I ring our centering bell and invite our children forward for our intergenerational message. Today, for our intergenerational message, we'll hear from 4 friends of Jane, their remembrances, and then we will hear from the choir, To My Old Brown Earth, written by Pete Seeger and arranged by Paul Haley and performed by the First Church Choir.
When I first started coming to church 6 or 7 years ago, I was too shy and anxious to mingle during coffee hour. During my first coffee hour, Jane saw me sitting quietly and walked right over to take a seat next to me. She introduced herself, and one of my first church friends were made. Every Sunday, I could look forward to Jane visiting with me and my family during our social hour. She was always an open book, happy to share her personal joys and concerns. Our talks always took a natural turn to deep, meaningful discussions. She made it so easy for me to open up about my own life and beliefs. Jane told stories of her children growing up in the church, explained how the RE program and the plays helped form a special bond between the church youth. Everything she told me of her and her kids' life over the years in the church sounded so beautiful. We should have made her the PR person for First Church. Jane was my closest friend in the church. We shared a lot in common, and she gave me lots of good advice and wisdom whenever I needed it. Jane gave it to me straight whenever I needed it, too. I will always cherish all of our conversations and memories.
Hi there. In the way back, when we all could be together, Raleigh would bring the children up to the front for intergenerational message. And, well, when my people were little, they would be rather vocal, embarrassingly so. And I would want to run up and shush them or yank their collars and get them to stop talking. And a hand would tap my shoulder. I'd turn around, or she would lean in, and Jane would say, "Don't shush them. They need their voice." And I can't say how grateful I am that she would lead the charge in a community that would welcome young people, no matter how young they are or how old they are. I miss Jane, and I miss the idea of her being in the pew, shushing the parents, telling them to let their kids have a voice.
I'm Tam Johnson. When asked to speak a few words about Jane Kelly, the first thing that comes to mind is family. She was just like family. Oh, I know many people say that, but Jane actually lived with us in the early 2000s. I had just lost my older sister in those days, and Jane became my surrogate sister. When I look at photos for her picture somewhere, I find lots and lots of children's birthday parties at our house and events here at First Church, but hardly one of Jane. Why? Because she was busy behind the scenes, helping to create the food, the ambiance, the fun. She loved it. The more she could use her imagination to figure out the events, the happier she was. Her family joined my family at every holiday in those days. Jane was really instrumental, as was Diana DiTicchio, in getting me to start the Parish Players. I directed the early shows there, and we produced them over 20 years ago. Both gals had talented sons, as well as the other talented young people here at First Church. And it was like the old Mickey Rooney line. We had the stage, we had the costumes, we had the talent. Let's put on a show. And so we did. And that's how Parish Players was born. Jane was my biggest fan, and she was my confidant. She helped me through my cancer journey, and I helped her in her educational milestones as she worked on her master's degree to become a full teacher instead of just a para at Boston Public Schools. When my mother passed away in 2002, Jane was there to help me care for my father in my home for the last years of his very long life. If it weren't for Jane and her son Matt, I'm just not sure we would have been able to give him the quality care that he received. I will always be grateful for that. When Miles took us from each other when I moved to Upton in 2009, I was grateful to all the folks here who could make the end of Jane's life very easy when she went through her cancer journey. It's hard to say goodbye to an old friend. The people at First Church were very fortunate to have such a great gal as Jane. But the memories I have of my sister friend, those I will always treasure.
Hi, good morning. I'd like to say something on behalf of the parish players and myself. In December, we lost one of our most precious parish players, Jane Kelly. It was a hard loss for our group and the church community, especially after a year of so much loss and uncertainty. Jane was our most fierce, big-hearted, and loyal friend, and she will be sorely missed. Whenever the parish players can come together again in person, whenever that is, it will be a long time before we stop looking for her in every moment. Yet she will be there in spirit and forever in our memories. Jane, we love you and we miss you. Thanks.
This is a remembrance of Jane and her First Church family. If I close my eyes and remember being back at church, one image comes to me, and it is of Jane sitting on the bench in the parish house across from the auditorium door. She was there before many of us. To get to church, she had gotten up early, taken the bus, stopped at Big Bear for a bite, and walked up High Street to church. This was not an easy trek for Jane, but she was there most Sundays. She came for many reasons, but I think most importantly because First Church was family. Her sons, John and Matt, were first and foremost, but First Church was an anchor in her life. Jane wasn't a saint, and now I can hear her laughter as clear as day. Like all of us, though, she had her good days and bad days. She had strong opinions, and as Janet Hurwitz might say, Jane shot from the hip and let you know what she thought. But then there was her smile, her laughter, and her love. People come to church for a lot of reasons. Jane came to First Church for the people. She might have chosen that seat on the bench in the parish house because it was close to the door, but I don't really think so. She sat there so she could be in the midst of things, and so she could see everyone coming and going, so she could talk, smile, wave, and watch. The people of First Church were very important to Jane, and she was a good observer of us. She noticed who was new, who came regularly, who hadn't been there in a while, how we were doing. Good, not so good. She loved jobs at First Church that put her in the midst of things. One of her favorite jobs was being the cashier at the Holly Fair lunch. Besides seeing everyone, she also got to know when to order that last bowl of soup before it ran out. Most of all, Jane absolutely loved the children of First Church. The children now and the ones who are grown. Jane was a member of this church for 40 years. She saw many children who were dedicated and went through our RE program. She taught RE and served as a coming-of-age mentor. Many of us have done that, but Jane truly loved the kids. She enjoyed seeing them grow and change, and she loved to see them come back. I think Jane might have been as thrilled as Jeff and I when Becca came back to church. She adored the babies, and and more than one child found it comforting to sit with Jane during the service. Jane was very proud of our kids and took great pleasure in watching the awkward teens grow into confident young men and women. I'm grateful for my friendship with Jane. It was a gift to see the world through her eyes. She saw things that I missed in my busyness. When we come back to church, I will look for Jane on the bench in the parish house or in the pew at the back. She won't be there, but I know her spirit and love will be with us.
You know, most of our children were friends with Jane, and I hope that they will always carry her smile and her laugh in their hearts. We will hear from the choir, My Old Brown Earth, written by Pete Seeger and arranged by Paul Haley and performed by the First Church Choir. Let us go into a time of prayer or meditation, as is your practice. Breathing in peace and breathing out love. Let us be grateful for all the silences in our lives, for with them we may more completely experience sound. Our first reading is from To Myself, an annotated selection from the Journal of Henry Thoreau, edited by Jeffrey Kramer. Preaching, lecturing, who are ye to ask for these things? Do ye want to hear, ye puling infants, a trumpet sound that would train you up to mankind, or a nurse's lullaby? The preachers and lecturers deal with men of straw, as they are men of straw themselves. Why, a free-spoken man of sound lungs cannot draw a long breath without causing your rotten institutions to come tumbling down by the vacuum he makes. Your church is a baby house made of blocks, and so the state. It would be a relief to breathe one's self occasionally among men. If there were any magnanimity in us, any grandeur of soul, anything but sex and parties undertaking to patronize God and keep the mind within bounds, how often we might encourage and provoke one with my mouth muzzled. Not till I am rabid, until there is danger that I shall bite the offending, and that my bite will produce hydrophobia. Freedom of speech, it has not entered your hearts to conceive what that word means. It is not leave given to me by your sect to say this or that. It is when leave is given to your sect to withdraw. The church, the state, the school, the magazine, they think they are liberal and free. It is the freedom of the prison yard. I invite you to relax into our anthem, Through Moanin' Pines by Harry T. Burleigh, played by Derry Dolezal. Our reading this morning is from Funerals Without God by Jane Wynne Wilson. The comfort of having a friend may be taken away, but not that of having had one. As there is sharpness in some fruits and bitterness in some wines, that pleases us, so there is a mixture of remembrance of friends where the loss of their company is sweetened again by the contemplation of their qualities. In some respects I have lost what I had, and in others I still retain what I have lost. It is ungrateful to reflect upon my friend's being taken away without any regard to the benefit of her being mine. Let us therefore make the most of our friends while we have them. For how long shall we keep them is uncertain. Let us therefore make the most of our friends while we have them, for how long we shall keep them is uncertain. She that has lost a friend has the joy she once had in her to match the grief that she has taken away. Shall one bury the friendship with the friend? I invite you to sing with me hymn number 151 in your gray hymnal, I Wish I Knew How. 151. Kelly did not want a funeral. She wanted a picnic in the public garden. Does that surprise any of you? She was a free spirit, mired by life's experiences, of course, constricted by resources and her own imagination, but a free spirit nonetheless. As a result of her wishes, I had spent the week constructing a service about the subject I wanted to speak about for 3 or 4 years, about the prison industrial complex. But when I sat down to write, all I could think about was Jane. I can speak about the prison industrial complex on another day, but today I felt an urge to speak instead about the freedom we need to create within our own brains and our own spirits to liberate our bodies to live our best life until we die. After Jane went to Dana-Farber for cancer treatment, she spoke to me quite often about the need for me to start a meditation group at church. She even encouraged me to invite the meditation instructor from Dana-Farber to come to First Church and lead a meditation. To begin with, Jane had a way of making friends with everyone and everywhere she went. She had such an optimistic spirit about the way things should be or ought to be. After speaking with her, sometimes my own insecurities would leave me feeling like I should always be doing something more. I say my own insecurities because I know Jane never told me I wasn't doing enough. She only had big ideas. She was a big idea person. One way we can free our minds is to not put words in other people's mouths. Take them at face value and to hear what they're really saying instead of interpreting what they mean by their comments. Stephen Covey, in his book 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, says that most people don't listen with the intent to understand. They listen with the intent to reply. Freedom of mind starts by really listening to others and responding from a deep understanding. One of the biggest obstacles to free thought is our need to hush or quell or reply with defensiveness. After hearing Allison's tribute to Jane, I realized how differently she could have responded to Jane telling her not to quell her children because their voices needed to be heard. She could have been upset. She could have said, "You don't know me," but she didn't. We often think that child rearing is a singular activity, one just for parents and home. Those of you who bring your children to our Faith Academy or our Children's RE each Sunday know it takes a village, and we all need to encourage and support each child to fully be who they are meant to be on this earth. This starts by listening to them. This week, we saw an unprecedented attack on our nation's capital. It was in many ways something most progressive thinkers have always feared happening, but to see it happen was nonetheless shocking. I had to ask myself if what we were seeing play out at the Capitol was free speech or something else. In Thoreau's journal, he speaks of straw preachers speaking to straw men who do not understand free speech. Free speech is using words to shake people's imaginations and metaphorically blow buildings down, not pushing past obstacles and breaking windows to make your point. The reason we give space for children to speak their minds in church is so that they will be able to stand up for themselves and not be blown over like straw men when confronted with different opinions. Learning to have a fully listening and fully speaking conversation with those you disagree with is an essential skill needed to live a free and responsible life. Jane understood this and encouraged parents to allow their children's voice to blossom. She also aided the children to hone their voices through her support of the parish players. The Parish Players are another place where Jane lived her best life. While I'm not sure she ever played a role on stage, she was vital to the makeup and I think concessions at some point of many of their shows. Finding ways to get involved and do things that are fun with friends is essential to living your best and most free life. As I have mentioned before in my sermons, my friend Jack Williams, who has been on death row in San Quentin for most of his adult life, for a crime he did not commit, speaks often of ways in which he strives not to let his days become institutionalized. As you can imagine, in a jail cell on death row for decades, it would take a great deal of intention not to have every day seem the same. So too, when our activities are limited by our health, by our resources, and by a pandemic, we can become stuck in ways that shackle us from creativity or pleasure. By all accounts, Jane used the public transportation system and books and movies to widen her horizons and give herself pleasures, even as her body started to make life more difficult. Jane loved her treks with friends. She took treks on her own as well to Castle Island, to the public garden, to the Boston Common and the public library, wherever she could. My friend Jack has learned to crochet and read books and use letter writing to expand his horizons despite the tiny footprint of his life. Finding what gives you pleasure amidst all of life's obstacles is essential to living a free and good life, no matter what your circumstances. The mourner's Kaddish that we read in opening words is something Jane had shared with Anne Sharaga when she was staying at the Hebrew Rehab. The line that jumps out at me, "You can love your best life by letting go of children that need to be free," fits so perfectly with what I think Jane could have wanted us to remember about her if she'd wanted to have a funeral. Let us find freedom in our current circumstances by listening and speaking fully and directly and adventuring and exploring, and most of all by investing our time and talents in the communities and people we care about, but also encouraging children to speak up. It is never easy to say goodbye to a friend like Jane or Hannah Held, but let us remember that life is just short. It's too short to flit it away in the freedom of the prison yards or of our imaginations, but let us instead do all that we can to live each day with joy. I also want to close by saying again that this is not a funeral for Jane. Jane did not want a funeral. It is my recommendation for a way to live life fully with integrity. And as we remember Jane on this day, we will remember her even more on some day in the spring when the saplings return to the public garden and we can gather for a picnic. May it be so. I invite you to sing with me hymn number 153, "Oh, I Woke Up This Morning." And now let us fix our steps, so we stagger not in the uneven motions of this world, but go steadily on our way, neither censuring our journey by the weather we meet, or turning aside from anything that might befall us. Amen. Please join me for Zoom Social Hour.